I did speed watch this movie, or speed read watch this movie.
Revenge of the Sith?
Yeah, just slightly. I was just like, jumping points, jumping. I didn't realize how much of these prequels I have blocked from my memory.
Welcome to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Another Pass podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies that we found fascinating but flawed. I am Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Sam Alisea.
Hi!
And you know what's funny? I say as always because that has become my habit since you have become the co-host of this show, starting with episode 101, which it's crazy to think that we are now 116 episodes in.
That's insane.
But it was not always. In fact, Another Pass has a long, weird history. And I'm just going to say it. I'm getting married this month, or at least this month as of when we are recording this episode. And it seemed like a crazy idea to try to record a bunch of episodes. So we figured, hey, we'll put out some of the episodes that are I've been meaning to put out since the beginning, because Another Pass started as a spinoff of a pre-existing show called Certain Point of View, the flagship show of this network. And it actually started as an episode idea that happened in the early episodes, back when Ben and Addy were first trying to figure out like new concepts each week between like movie releases and big like news updates, for things to talk about. And I suggested, hey, this was a thing we did back when I was working at New World with Jeff Moonen, like where we would just like speculate on movie ideas. What if we did that for Revenge of the Sith and the Star Wars prequels, as I had done many a time with Jeff? And Ben and Addy were like, that sounds like a great idea. So it started here. So we're gonna listen today to the Revenge of the Sith episode, because I've been meaning to put it back on the Another Pass feed since Certain Point of View shut down. It seemed like a good time to do it for all those reasons. And So
Yeah.
Sam, before you listen to this, and I was like, hey, let's do this as a way of saving time and so forth.
Yeah.
Noting that you've met Ben, you haven't met Addy, and you weren't really that familiar with Certain Point of View,
Right.
back in those days. Like, I may have shared an episode or two with you then, but it was really when Another Pass became like my own baby that like I connected you with all of this.
Right.
What were your thoughts before you listened to this episode?
So I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I mean, honestly, my real thought was like, oh man, I'm going to have to rewatch the prequels. And I have not watched those since I went to see them in theaters. I've watched clips here and there. Like, you know,
and I'm going to say for the record, I didn't say you had to watch the prequel movies. I just said, give the episode a listen to.
You didn't. I wanted to make sure, like, if I was commenting on the things that were being commented on, I wanted to have a point of reference, because I realized in listening to these episodes and also like rewatching some of the movies, specifically Revenge of the Sith, which is the least annoying to me of the three prequels, the best of the three. I was like, wow, I repressed a lot of these movies. Like, I did not remember that Anakin and Padme had a secret wedding. Like, I had decided that it didn't happen in my mind. Like, it's so funny. So as I was listening, I was like, oh, you know what? I need to like go. I need to go and like skim these movies. Now, I did watch them at like 1.5 speed, so I did not watch them normal. I did speed through things. I skipped scenes, but I have to say, like, this is going to be a different episode for people who are used to our regular, where we kind of talk about the good and the bad. You guys just jumped in. You were like, all right, and you were so excited, which is lovely. People are going to hear a lot of excited people, like, giving really, like, I mean, honestly, this could have fixed this movie. And the premise, there's kind of like a little intro that lets you know that the premise is that you're working backwards because you're changing the movies as you go forward. So everything that happened in the first and second movie already happened. So you have to just change what's in Revenge of the Sith. And I thought that was really an interesting concept. And
Yeah, we've done sequels, but it's been a while since we've done like a third movie in a series.
Yeah. So,
where you're really stuck with your actors at that point, or if you're not, it's going to be like a thing.
Yeah.
It'll be one of the things people like talk about the movie, just the recast part.
So there's some like really good, there's some really excellent points here made. And I think even though this was definitely recorded years ago, I think a lot of it still stands true within the universe to be sound. So yeah, I think people in general are going to enjoy it. Just, it's not going to have its normal, like, this was the good things, these were the bad things. It's kind of like right into the pitch. Fast and Furious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a certain point of view started off as a Star Wars podcast. So there was an assumption that like anyone listening to the show had probably seen all the Star Wars movies, which I think holds true. Like, and I think the Venn diagram of people who have seen Star Wars and people who listen to our podcast is likely a small little hole for our podcast just inside of the Venn diagram of people who've seen Star Wars. Like, it's very rare that we encounter someone in our sphere who's never seen them.
Yeah.
Although not unheard of, but it's a little overlap of that dot, just poking out.
And I'm not judging people who haven't. I mean, like, I get it. Like, I never saw Saved by the Bell as a kid, and I refuse to watch it now because it's just fun to tell people that it's something I never saw and have their jaws drop. It's fun.
But we're going to hop into the episode. I'm not going to play the entire episode because there's a good chunk at the beginning that is like us talking about news, but this was in 2017, so that news is like so old, it's like kind of uncomfortable to listen to now, beyond just the sort of nostalgia of being like, oh yeah, we actually cared about these things. Like we allude to past episodes in the opening preamble. We talk about like upcoming Star Wars news related to like Rogue One, which is like so far back now that it's feels it's unnecessary, and it takes up like the first like 30 minutes of the episode. So we're going to get into the main bulk. Like, I'm going to play the opening song because I need people to remember what the hell the opening credits used to be on that show. We'll play a little bit of the introduction, and then we'll cut on over to the actual like another pass portion, and then we'll come back to us just to have our thoughts on the episode itself. So yeah, we're going to do another pass, add another pass. We're going to look at the episode of Certain POV that was the launching point for the show. We'll drop an ad in between there for one of our network partners, and then it'll be back with me and Sam to talk about our thoughts about that episode. So see you soon.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun, whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen,
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
and on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there, so we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.
Welcome to Certain Point of View, your first step into a much nerdier world. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com. And now, your hosts, Ben Milton and Addy Thomas.
Hey, Nerf Herders, I'm Addy Thomas.
And I'm Ben Milton.
We got Case with us again.
Woo!
Thanks for having me back, guys.
Dude, you are quickly becoming just a regular. Like, you've almost made the team. Like, you're in the minor leagues. We're thinking about calling you up.
I'm like the B squad host.
I like it.
Which is funny because you're really the nerd that kind of legitimizes us in a certain sense. You know, like you come up with the actual data, whereas we just kind of
Throw crap out against the wall and make stuff up as we talk.
Exactly.
But that's how nerds are. We all have the different types of things, our specialties, and like who can fetch the random factoid from their brain versus who knows all the issue numbers versus,
Right.
We need to have all the different types of nerds all sitting together talking, maybe over cards. Who knows?
Hint, hint.
Well, don't forget, you can join the conversation. You can join it through social media. You can tell us if we have stupid ideas, if we have great ideas, or if you're somewhere in the middle too, you can let us know. If you have ideas that are better than ours, all of that, just go to check out our social media on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, even on Twitch when we're streaming every now and then. You can find all of that on our website, certainpov.com. Today we're going to be talking about a little bit of a rewrite of Star Wars Episode 3. Before we get to that, just have a couple things that we want to touch on. Well, so let's move on. We've got the actual episode.
Oh, you actually want to talk about something today?
I don't have it. Just didn't have a transition for this
No
one.
good transition.
Yeah.
There is
I
a
like
good
that.
transition
really
from
nice?
I want another
If
dragon.
this was film, we'd have a nice wipe.
That's
because
true.
what we're talking
Star
about
wipe.
today is Star Wars. Specifically, we're going to do sort of our version of a game I used to play with a buddy of mine, which is repitch the movies. So today we're doing Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And the idea here is that we're going off the perspective of, let's say Episode 1 and 2 came out. So it doesn't matter how big of a train wreck those were. Those came out. Let's pitch the third one and make it work.
Try to redeem the other
redeem
two.
the franchise with that.
But still, those two are still canon. They're catalog. They're out there.
Yeah,
you have to
they're in
work
theaters.
off of what's already been produced.
Yeah, the idea is
and
like,
make something good out
Lucas
of it.
acknowledged, okay, the first two were mistakes. I need to bring some talent in to make it. These guys have a podcast. Let's have them
Punch it up.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Which frankly wouldn't have been a bad idea.
Yeah, they should have called us.
I love. There's nothing like one of my favorite games,
I mean,
and we'll
I was
talk
like
about this at
16,
some point.
but,
is
whatever.
casting. Like I love playing. Like who would you cast? There would be a lot of changes.
And on that note,
And there would be a lot of Clive
because this is the
Owen.
third movie, you can't really do that.
You
much
can't
casting.
really do that
You're
much
pretty
except for
stuck
with new
with
characters. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it would involve Clive Owen. Is absolutely right.
Well, I'm going to throw this out here for you now. Maybe Clive Owen is General Grievous in mine. So, well, I'm not putting him as robot.
Right,
General
obviously.
Grievous to start out with.
Obviously.
But here, I'll back
All
up.
right, so
Why don't you start, Addy?
Let me finish by just
Okay, go
giving
ahead.
a shout out to the buddy of mine who actually he and I were the ones who came up with this game, and we did this for a bunch of movies. We here are going to eventually do it to other Star Wars movies, but for right now we're doing Episode 3. So shout out to Jeff Moonen.
Thank you, Jeff.
Who is a massive nerd that if he didn't live in New York would be great to be on the show. So
Well, there's
Addy, why
always
don't-
Skype.
Yeah.
So we might have to have Jeff on at some point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jefffer. Addy, what do you got?
All right, so I reworked the open of Revenge of the Sith. I didn't there were a couple scenes that I a couple key moments that I have problems with, but Episode 3 is actually of the of the prequel trilogy is the one that I actually kind of like in certain instances. I have issues with obviously the awkwardness of the dialogue between Padme and Anakin, and then and Anakin's actual turn, and that was the moment that stuck out to me. Like they just didn't build up to that turn so well. One, because of how sudden it was, and also he went from wanting to save Padme to killing younglings really, really quickly. So I actually tried to figure out, all right, what's going to justify that kind of Anakin that he's gonna go with that. So I decided to rework the opening. I wanted to give moral complexity to the prequels, and one of the issues I always had were Jedi was automatically good, Separatists were automatically bad. And even though they say that they weren't, the opening crawl says, there were heroes and villains on both sides, and the Clone Wars does a good job at adding some complexity. Like you have Jedi falling from the Order, you see the Republic is inefficient, and you see that there are a couple heroes with the Separatists. Not a lot. They could have done more with that. Mm-hmm. So Anakin's turn needs to be rooted in something more interesting, and I was watching an arc with the character that's going to be in Rogue One, Saw Gerrera,
right?
And there was an interesting phrase that Anakin uses when he's talking to Ahsoka about kind of separating out her feelings from what she's doing right there, and he says, purpose over feelings. And I thought that would be an interesting through line to connect with Anakin and why he decides to go ahead and kill younglings. Why he feels his purpose is grand enough to usher in the Empire, to get rid of the Jedi Order, that he feels his purpose justifies these terrible, terrible acts that he loses himself in. So one of the other things I would have liked to work into this and wasn't able to was to show some of the Jedi who maybe have defected over to the Separatists. Okay. But I'd like to open, instead of the big fight and kidnapping of Emperor Palpatine or Chancellor Palpatine at this point, I kind of want to open with two X-Wing fighters or X-Wing prototypes. They kind of had it in that opening fight, but instead of them being on the side of the Republic, they're Separatist fighters. So you're already starting to see you're already planting that the Separatists are the beginnings of the Rebel Alliance, or at
Yeah,
least
this is
the
actually very
fragments.
similar to stuff that I was going to pitch for later. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So you already see like elements of that. The camera's going to pan with them to reveal a big massive space battle, kind of like the opening of that we did have with Revenge of the Sith. Because I did love the slow drum beat and then opening with the big battle with all the different with all the different carriers and Star Destroyers and all of that. And instead of and this time we also see the two Jedi starfighters for Anakin and Obi-Wan following these two X-wing like fighters. It's above I'm just gonna say a jungle planet just because we haven't had too many jungle planets in Star Wars, and it'd be nice to mix it up. I didn't want to put another desert planet because we've had too many of them at this point.
So it's not Dagobah, but it looks like Dagobah.
No, I was gonna actually like Felucia would be a cool one that was in Revenge of the Sith. That was sort of unique, but we never really got to see much of.
Okay.
Would have been a cool one to go with.
I'm with you.
And
Or
there's
Kashyyyk
another
would work also pretty well.
That's true, but there's a reason also for the jungle imagery, because I'd like to have. So what's happening in this battle is the Republic is evacuating like crazy out of this planet, and I want to draw from like Vietnam, Saigon type of imagery.
God damn it, we're so in sync right now.
Are we really?
I was totally thinking about all this.
Well, because I think it's better for the political complexity of the prequels that Lucas tried to get at, because the original trilogy is very it's very Cold War, World War II-ish, very very simplistic, good and bad, whereas Lucas does try to bring in
Create
something
some complexity and modernize that story.
Yeah.
exactly, and I think Vietnam is kind of the perfect imagery and the perfect like set to kind of do that on. So you have,
especially because like when they use Coruscant, like it's a cool idea to be like, oh, they actually made it this far, and like you can certainly set up a cool story about it, but they don't. Like
right.
the city just goes right back to being fine. No one was like evacuated. No one was like in hiding.
Right.
No one was in bunkers like Pacific Rim. Like it's like Coruscant would just it was like, oh, we got really close to Coruscant. Oh cool. Everyone
the party
wave.
going, everybody.
I was kind of immune
Yeah.
from it. There were no like other than the big separatist carrier that crashes and lands relatively safely. There's no real damage to Coruscant that we see, So that's totally one of those issues here. So I decided, all right, like let's start seeing the cost of this war. I thought they did like you did have an Anakin who was a little bit more scarred up, a little bit more rugged, definitely a little bit more battle weary, and I think that was something good that you can go with. So here's the concept with what's happening in this battle. You have got troop transports, supplies and resources are being run out to the fleet in orbit. They're just evacuating like crazy. Jedi and clone pilots are doing their best to protect this evacuation as best as they can. And I was thinking, I wasn't sure who should be the Jedi in command here. I was thinking Mace Windu would be good, so it connects with the moment when Anakin decides to off or attempt to off Mace Windu, but I also thought Ki-Adi-Mundi looks like kind of a dick, so he would also be a good guy to throw in there. I don't know.
You'd use them both, really.
Yeah,
It's such a
exactly.
big thing.
Right. So we have him sort of in the command position in one of the main Star Destroyers. He reminds Anakin and Obi-Wan to stay close to the transport when one is lost, and so like you have a whole like battalion of troopers lost right there and a bunch of supplies. But there's also an emphasis that these resources, these minerals, are also important to the war effort. So there's very clearly like they're trying to make it. They're evacuating a whole bunch. It's refugees, it's troopers, it's all of this. On the ground, you have Republic positions are just desperately being evacuated because they're being overrun by the droid army and local separatist guerrilla fighters, and they're led by a charismatic-ish leader. You're not sure who he is. We know who he is because he's got multiple lightsabers on his belt. And he's got some cybernetic implants because I know Lucas. I'm going to say it right here. It's Grievous, but Lucas wanted to use Grievous as sort of like
a proto Vader in terms of the body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like that was an interesting idea that Lucas tried to go with, but let's kind of keep that spirit in there.
Instead of going like just he has lungs.
Right.
Yeah, I mean they made him look like the battle droids that the Separatists were using in the first two movies, and which you can see like okay it's shared technology, but for it to be that like sort of proto Vader, I would have rather it been like
not
much more difficult to support a damaged human body body. Like you could have this like stick frame kind of robot, and like if it's just an autonomous thing, that's fine. But the second you have to be like supporting human conditions, like it goes out into space at one point, like that should be really difficult for Like you can't just have it just be exposed. Like it's not even just the breathing thing. Like there's all these other factors,
cold.
the cold and radiation and all that stuff.
Right,
like,
but he's got exposed lungs there.
He's fine.
Yeah, it's all good.
He's fine.
So I kind of want to go with you cut back to the space battle. Anakin comments that he and Obi-Wan would be of better use on the ground, evacuating the refugees. And there's a lot of you see the refugees on the ground. Windu reminds him though that they need the resources, they need the troops, and. You get to see Anakin at his best as a pilot again, since that is, a big part of who he is. We get to see neat tricks. Nothing.
I want to reach across the table and just strangle you right now.
If Anakin's like, I'm a really good pilot, and they're like, we need you on the ground, and he sees something coming, and he hops in a ship, and that's how he like gets into the aerial battle. Yeah, like because I see what you're saying. You want him to be like kind of rebellious and like emphasizing that. Like that would be cool. Like they're like, we need all the force on the ground. We like the troopers got it up there. Yeah. We need people who can think for themselves down here. Right. And he sees how badly they're doing, and he hops up and like does this huge victory. Like he saves the day, like he did way back when on Naboo. Right. But like that would be cool. Yeah.
Well, so we'll keep going with this. Even though Windu won't let him go to the surface and help the refugees, Obi-Wan reminds him purpose over feelings, and this is a phrase that I would like for it to come up regularly in the rest of the story. You cut back to the ground. You're down to like a single evac zone. You can kind of see the separatists are swarming the area. Like you're going like straight up Saigon imagery. You have refugees handing their kids to troopers on the transports, just desperately trying to get away. It's a mix of clone troopers and refugees. And what I also would like, and this isn't necessarily something that would have been apparent in the movie, but I would have liked young Jedi on the ground, Jedi who were clearly Padawans who've had to replace and refill the ranks. Normally they wouldn't be in this position, but because of the toll of the war, they're in these command positions and they're not quite as ready for this, but this is all that they had. This is all the force that the Jedi had to dedicate to this particular mission.
So already the Jedis are depleted and diminished.
Yeah,
well, they're not diminished. They're overstretched, right? Like to be in all these places, there's only so many Jedi who are like combat ready and experienced.
Which in Revenge of the Sith, they did have a moment like that when they cut to the Jedi Council chamber, and there's a whole bunch more people on
different
on hologram, but there was also missing empty chairs too. Yeah, so you have that. We'll have a spectacular sequence where Anakin brings down a Separatist cruiser. The Separatist forces swarm the Final Republic post on the ground. So the clone troopers, refugees, and the two young Jedi take refuge in a depot with a mix of supplies. And you hear over the communications to Windu that the cries that Grievous is here. You see surgically just some of the clone troopers in that last depot and the two Jedi taken out. Grievous walks in, and you're not really sure what to think of him, but he promises he's there to help the refugees. Windu, hearing that Grievous is there, orders a strike on the bunker because this is a guy that's been escaping them. We know we can take him out. Anakin doesn't protest it. Anakin just tries to go for the bunker. He tries to head to the surface as quickly as he can, while Obi-Wan protests the action and says, just send us down and we can try to save them and we can try to capture Grievous. Whereas Windu just says, no, this is our opportunity. And
kill him and the innocents as well.
Exactly. So you have a moment where you have all these refugees and these women and children and elderly people are taken out because of the cost of war sort of moment here. And just for the sake of a fun cameo, we'll throw Tarkin in as the guy that Windu hands the order to fire the strike on it. But right there, you have a moment where Anakin is helpless and has had to decide, well, the purpose of the war outweighed, the lives of these refugees. So you have it. You have a moment that later on is easier for him to object to who the Jedi are.
Do you feel, my only question to that is...
Is it too dark for a Star Wars movie?
No, is it too out of character for Mace?
Well, and that's so one thing I thought I would like to go. That's why I wanted to throw Ki-Adi-Mundi in there. Yeah. I was like, I don't know if I want to make Samuel L. Jackson a bad guy, but I also thought like there was an interesting idea with Mace in terms of lore, was that because his purple lightsaber is supposed to be, he has like a mix
the balance
of dark,
of light and dark, yeah.
Right. So it would be an interesting like
choice for him.
Exactly.
This would also play much better to Samuel L. Jackson, who like is not given a part that he was really meant to play with Mace. Like,
right.
It's just not his type of character. But if he's barking orders on a battlefield and is forced to go like really crazy about it, like, or like not
make a
crazy,
tough decision,
but, like, yeah, make those tough decisions. It's like now, you know, like do that. You can
now, motherfucker.
Well, exactly, but they're not going to have him say that. So
it's a very different Star Wars.
Drop the motherfucking bomb. Like, yeah.
I'm sick of these motherfucking droids on this motherfucking plane.
But yeah, that would play very much to the actor, which is a problem that this series kind of failed a lot across the board.
Yeah,
because the prequels as a whole did.
Yeah,
like they cast this like really passionate, like large personality actor, and was like, no, I want you to sit and be subdued
and timid.
When people ask you questions, you're like, I don't know if that's wise. Like that's all his character. Like. So yeah, I think
they wanted Morgan
Mace,
Freeman out of Samuel L. Jackson,
right?
But yeah, so that's I think that would be an interesting open to change up the tone. Sith is already a darker movie. You have the killing of younglings in the movie, even though you cut away from it, and you can cut away from the destruction and imply the violence here. But I think this would fit.
I like it a lot. I like it, and to combine it with ring theory, as it were.
Yeah.
Like open with the big battle on the jungle planet. Yeah. I see what you're doing.
That's
there.
why I was like, I got to keep a couple things true to this.
Yeah, I see what you're doing there.
Well done, Addy. Good job. Case, what do you got? Where did you want to mix up and change?
Okay, so like I said, this is actually shockingly close to what I was thinking about it, because it'd be great if like they were on like. If you open, you could even do the space fight, and they like get on the carrier, and the carrier crash lands in the middle of the war zone, and then they have to like fight their way through it, or something like that. But make it a ground battle, a really important fight, because the movie, as it is currently, you feel like after that opening sequence when they finally like crash land on Coruscant, you feel like the war's pretty much done. Like it's like the last holdouts are still there, but the war is over. Like they made that one big push on Coruscant, which we see the very end of. They beat it, and then all of a sudden everyone's in hiding, and they go flush out the remainder. It's like going after Nazi war criminals after Europe's been cleared out. Like, so yeah, I'm shocked that like we were that in sync on this one. I also am totally about like having the heroes on both sides, because my big thing was like, so I did a machete order cut of episode 2 and 3, like down to one movie, and I found that if you could make a perfectly fine edit that doesn't feature Grievous at all, like if you want, you can just completely cut him out, and no one would even know. Like they would reference him once or twice, and that'd be it, which is fine. He's a General Grievous, whatever. Yeah. Like. So what I would love is if at the end of the movie, to sort of tie back to this, when Obi-Wan steps into like the chamber with like Senator Organa and like all these people like at the foundation of the rebellion, like Grievous is sitting there with all these other like people from the Separatists, and he goes like, "Strange times make for strange bedfellows, Kenobi." And then it's like, yes, it does. And then he sits down, and then credits. like that would be a really interesting opening,
right
to that, or pardon me, interesting conclusion to that movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally am with you on that one. I kind of also would maybe throw in like reveal that Anakin has had a few wounds since Clone Wars or Attack of the Clones. So like maybe he's got like an artificial heart or something, like like little pieces.
He's
not
already
like,
starting to become augmented.
Yeah, he's lost
more
his
than
arm.
just
the arm. The arm was the big thing, but like so nothing that big. But like like maybe like he's got like a plate in his head, and you can clearly see like a metal piece or something attached. Like little details there. So yes, that's sort of a big one. The problem I think with the bulk of the movie is that the stakes are really skewed. Like I said, Coruscant doesn't look like it's really been damaged. you know, it looks like everyone's on the run. Everything's fine. Like, you know, like
there's no stakes.
He has a nightmare that his wife might die, which is only it's its own thing.
Right.
You know,
it's not really tied to the Clone Wars.
no, not at all. Like the Clone Wars could have been a really cool. I mean, ultimately, it would be a backdrop for like the personal conflicts that sort of rise up. But yeah, so I would definitely do very similar things with like Grievous being much more of a hero. With like just generally the Separatists not being like, oh, we're bad guys who are coming to like wipe everything out.
Right.
Like I'd love to see a Republic invasion of a Separatist planet too. You know, like it should be back and forth, and there's a lot going on because if the Republic's winning, it means they're going into territory that had previously been controlled by the Separatists, and that those can't all just be like. You know, machine armies of like the Trade Federation. Like, so building off that, oh man, it's so exactly what I was thinking. Like a really brutal like conflict that takes up the first half of the movie. Like, you know, you can cut away from it, but like tie up most of your cast in this like big battle for the first half, and then you can actually sort of deal with like the falling action of a bunch of people escaped. We don't know where they went, and as they're like in this confusion, that's when the Emperor like seizes it, because like all of a sudden it's like, oh well, we've basically won, they've all escaped, and that's he has to like make his move, and I'm not sure what exactly that move would be, but like make his move to like become the Emperor, to like prevent them from having a question of like should he step down or anything. He's just like, nope, I'm in charge, and that's when he like
just seizes control.
Yeah.
I have something similar. Like, can I piggyback right now?
Ahead.
So my problem, and that I wanted to fix was Order 66 and the destruction of the Jedi. I wanted to make that more of a law, that they were annihilated by law and not by some magical code that was programmed into the clone's head.
I agree. It shouldn't have been a one-off.
That it was an ongoing
I would have loved to see
process
Vader
thing.
like traveling around killing people.
Yes, for sure, and everybody was, and there was, you know, in my version, there's bounties on the Jedis, and everybody is hunting them, and there's rewards for killing Jedis, etc. And that's because at some point in time in the movie, and I kind of just jumped into it, but Palpatine maneuvers for the vote of no confidence to control the Senate, and he does, and in doing so, the Jedi are disturbed by this, and they're not okay with it. So they send an envoy, a group of Jedi, over to meet and talk to Palpatine about this. And in that conversation, it's revealed that Palpatine is in fact the Sith Lord that they've been hunting for. But instead of having the stupid fight that goes off where he just kills everybody, you know, one off, and that awkward moment,
because they were
and then burns his own face off.
Which doesn't make any sense. Like he tells them flat out, he's like, look, you are either going to serve me and the Senate that which you are sworn to protect, or I will have you destroyed. And so he puts the Jedi in this awkward position of having to serve the Senate, in which they are sworn to protect, knowing that a Sith Lord is controlling the Senate. And so there's like this really weird like power play for the control of the Senate of like, what do we do? Do we break our oath and try to kill this Sith Lord and throw him out of power, or are we subject to our oath? And so they have this ongoing debate and this ongoing kind of war amongst themselves, in which Anakin and Obi-Wan are on opposite sides of that argument, in which Anakin sees an opportunity to unite the Sith and the Jedi, bring them together, and make one better thing. Purpose over feeling and balance to the Force. And Obi-Wan and Mace especially is really against this, and no, we need to kill the Sith Lord and take out this threat to the Jedi Order. And so it starts to bring that rift between the two, and so that they're, you know, now we have a reason for them to fight down the road.
Jedi Civil War?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This would be a really nice moment to do what they did in Force Awakens and have a really good hologram that you would be forgiven for thinking was real. Like if the confrontation with Sidious was they thought they were talking to him, and his evil is so everywhere that it clouded their senses. And then when they're like, then all of a sudden they realize that they're not in the room with him, and that he's actually like out in the public.
Yes.
Something like that, where if they're going to rebel, they have to do it openly.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. Like when they like, or when Sidious is like, oh, the Jedi have rebelled. No
Yeah.
one sees it. No one ever witnesses
knows that that's what's
It would
going
be
on.
great if they had to make an assassination attempt in public, or like just make a stand
exactly.
against it.
So that was something
So
that I had
everyone would
that
turn.
eventually it comes to a head, and they make that decision that they're going to try to forcefully remove Palpatine. At the same time, Grievous shows up with his army. There's a quick brokered peace, quote unquote, which allows Grievous and Palpatine to unite fully as one now to protect the best interests of the galaxy and bring peace to the galaxy. And it wipes out a majority of the Jedi at that moment when they're making that attack.
So your Grievous is still definitely very, very much a villain. Still.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's still a villain, but well, he's a warrior.
Right.
He's a
Right.
general. They're
Right.
depending on which side you're on, he's a hero.
That's true.
So I think it still works. I like having the complexity of Grievous and having him actually be someone formidable that the Jedi are not intimidated by, but like have respect for. Of like, we really don't want to tangle with this guy because he does kill a lot of us.
Yeah.
So so in that's where a good bit of the Jedi are slaughtered, is in that big battle.
Yeah.
And from there on out, the order is given that the Jedi religion is now an illegal religion, and they are to be freely hunted and destroyed.
I like it. Yeah.
This all works. I mean, it actually would tie it together pretty well if they captured Dooku, and then he revealed the information, and then it looks like he leads them to attack Palpatine ultimately. Like, he's with them. And so since he's already been disgraced and discredited and like referred to as a Sith Lord, like the public is given to watch what appears to be a Sith Lord in command of all the Jedi attacking the Chancellor.
So the Chancellor doesn't reveal to everybody else that he's Sith. That would make sense.
Not to the public.
Yeah,
not to
yeah.
the wide world.
Yeah.
And so like you could even have like Dooku's arms have been cut off, but he's there and he's got like metal hands, but he's not holding a lightsaber, but he's like points the way. It's like that, like
that very symbolic that way, kind of leading the charge into.
Yeah, they like capture him at the beginning and like maybe keeping him alive because now that once he's captured and in the Jedi's possession, like Palpatine spends the whole time trying to get him transferred over, and like the Separatists are trying to kill him because he knows too much. And then it's like once he reveals why, so it could be like one of those tense like crime stories where it's like the informant who knows all the information,
right?
Like they have to keep him
them
alive, and ultimately they try to like use him to like get inside close to Palpatine's stuff. So that they can like take him out, but in doing so, they stumble into like a very public venue where they are then just shown like attacking Palpatine, and that's where he like guns down a bunch of them.
Yeah, but for great PR for his services,
right? Exactly.
So everybody, so the feeling of goodwill leaves the Jedi, and everybody's kind of like, these guys are monsters and power hungry hippies with lightsabers. I like it. Yeah, that's totally good. And then the other thing that I wanted to change, and it doesn't really matter how it happens, but Padme has to survive the movie.
Yeah, it is weird how in Jedi they talk about it. And we all know the headcanon is like, oh, well, she's talking about Organa's wife and like all that. But it would be nice to have her survive because why the fuck not? Well,
I like the idea then of like, of her being at odds with Anakin over this issue of him supporting the Chancellor, supporting the Empire, and her like being thrust out with the Senate and kind of being pushed off to the side, and having that split between them, so that she has reason to hide Luke and Leia, but still be around.
Well, so what do you do with Padme beyond that? Because obviously she's not in the originals. Like, does she?
She has to die sometime in between there. Yeah, absolutely.
There's a big time gap, and if Leia was talking about her biological mother, then we revealed in Jedi anyway that she was dead. Like,
it's true.
Yeah. So she just has to die by the time Leia's a teenager.
Right. By the time of A New Hope, really is all you need.
Right up to A New Hope.
She could have been alive on Alderaan.
Exactly.
And doesn't that make Alderaan have so much more weight?
Yes,
that's
totally.
true.
Totally does. Yeah. So she's alive on Alderaan.
Yeah.
That's what I was going with all along. Yeah. Right up until that one moment when it got real hot. So, those are the two things that I really wanted to change.
I like that you bring up Padme, because I was going to say that is the one thing we hadn't really addressed so far.
Right.
Because I think we can address like the fight scenes and the big battles and the things that we all wanted that we didn't quite get in this movie. But that doesn't change the through line. We need that love story, because that's clearly what Lucas wanted, and we need some additional personal reason to drive Vader down this path.
My thought on that was that Anakin sort of saw himself as a politician equal to Padme.
Right, which they already established in Attack of the Clones when they're having their debates about, democracy, the value of democracy.
Right, and so I the way I see it playing out is Anakin wanted to be on the Jedi Council, to be Padme's equal in having influence on what was going on. Where she's a very influential senator, he would be on the Jedi Council, but he's never given the opportunity to be on the Jedi Council because of all of his issues and not listening. And that kind of like starts to spill over, where eventually it's discovered that he's married to Padme, that she's pregnant, and this also can be another point then to cause a rift between Obi-Wan and Anakin and the Jedi.
Right.
And you could have like a trial where he's banished from the Jedi Order, which drives him to Palpatine in frustration.
I like that. Because if he never, like, as it is, he never really suffers for being married to her. Like, it's like, oh, we were right, you totally shouldn't have been married and had kids. Like, that's a bad choice.
Yeah.
But like, he never has like a direct consequence to it. Like, it could have just as easily been open to the public, and it wouldn't have had an impact on the story as it was presented. So yeah, I think that would be good, because then if he's forced out of the Order because he's married to her, that will add to his resentment of her.
Of her and of the Jedi as well.
For both.
Sure.
But
Totally.
like he has this, you could really explain that he has this great inferiority complex, being a slave that like was freed, but it wasn't through his own power, and then like has been uplifted, but he himself, no matter how hard he tries to prove himself, his successes in station have never been his own. Like he might be a great like war hero, but he's never put to be like as the general because of his accomplishments. He's never like on the council,
even though he's obviously the most powerful Jedi on the field, and able to do all these amazing things. Yeah, exactly. And so there's this resentment and this frustration of like, why won't you ever recognize me for who I am? My accomplishments. And so, that drives him to try even harder, which only, drives him further away down the path of the Sith.
Right.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of like the second half of the movie being a little bit dirtier in terms of the clear division of like Clone Wars, not Clone Wars, like Clone Wars into Empire Rebellion. Like if we sort of open the movie with like this huge battle that's really like one of the last big battles, and we don't just focus on that one location, we like jump around a little bit. We do. I mean, let's say Kashyyyk, because like I know Lucas always wanted to do it. It'll be fun,
and it'll be super cool. Yeah,
like it'll be fun. We'll get to show it, but do it well and have it be bloody and terrifying, and like huge chunks of the trees are like burned away, so all of a sudden you're seeing down to like the like the Underdark or whatever they called it. Like, so all of a sudden you're revealing these chunks of the planet that had never been seen before, and the Wookiees don't really trust people because everything's just destruction, and but like troopers are telling them like, if you come with us, like you'll live, but no, you'll actually die. I mean, we cut around to like a few other battles, but like the big one's this one, and then the middle of the movie is sort of basically the war is over. There's a few things to be cleaned up, but there's also all these atrocities and so forth that we're starting to realize were happening. Like there were these like war crimes that occurred, and like these horrible things. So people are starting to like go towards the rebellion. Like the rebellion starts before the Empire is really a thing, and then like the end of the movie, like the third act, is actually Anakin like starting to hunt down those Jedi and like those rebels, like the earliest ones, and like maybe his killing Padme isn't like a force choke right there, or him thinking he killed Padme, but rather like he like sees that her ship is flying away and that she's got all this information, like documents or something, that he needs. So he gives the order to to shoot it down, and he doesn't see that she and he walks off, and he doesn't see that she was in an escape pod that got away. But like he
assumes she's dead.
thinks he destroyed the ship that she was on.
Right, because he has to think she's dead.
Exactly, and not realize that there are kids out there too. Because I was going to ask you about that. How do you deal with him not knowing about the kids?
He has to think that she's dead.
So with this now, with him hunting down the Jedi,
I'm going to note, by the way, that if we can't solve the kids problem with this movie, because we've already created way too big of a problem by showing like his family on Tatooine, and he's named Skywalker.
Oh,
and, like,
right. Yeah, we'll never. Well, I mean, we've got that he doesn't like sand. So.
Yeah. I mean, like
that's good enough. If you're in a big metal robot, in leather, you don't like sand.
Friendly.
Yeah, he never looked into like his half brother. He was like never like in a moment of depression and doubt over the course of his like being trapped in a sardine can.
I think there was a lot. I think there's a lot of emotional reasons to that for that character as to why he would not want to go back to Tatooine.
Oh, I know, but I'm saying like that doesn't mean that you don't question that. Why wouldn't he ever have done it? Like you can present all the reasons why he didn't. But
the galaxy's a giant place, and I think that Palpatine would have kept him busy enough.
Yeah, and it also didn't seem like he established a relationship with the Lars.
Yes, and that's also true. But like this is still a justification for a thing that already is not. It's not a plot hole. It's just like
it's
a
close
little
to
awkward. Like,
I don't think so.
Well, they exist in a world with computers that are networked to each other. He can look up people. He can check out census reports.
Like they have. Does he never Google himself Skywalker? If he Googles himself, it's like, oh my god,
because
Luke
Skywalker
really good
is dead. He has ceased to be.
What do people think of Anakin?
Oh, they really like the pod races.
Nobody likes the goddamn pod races, Addy.
Didn't he hold a record or something?
That'd be great if they like in the like Rogue One or something, like they show his meditation chamber, and then finally like
his pod race.
Well, they shifted the angle, and you saw all these trophies. And pod racing.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say you see him playing like a PS4 game of the pod racing. And then the James Earl Jones voice. Now this is pod racing.
Impressive.
That actually, that would not be a horrible line to throw. Not that exactly. No. If it was a really dangerous flight mission that he was on, and he was like. To think I used to like think pod racing was hard or something like that, like some sort of line or like
some sort of callback.
Yeah, just a little throwback to it, like
or dehumanize him a little bit.
Trick. Sorry,
shut up, man. Why are you like quoting all the really bad ones?
Because they're so bad.
Oh. Wait till we got 2 more episodes to go before you really get into that one.
Yeah. Let's be honest. If the title already wasn't taken for the podcast, now this is podcasting. You would have gone for it.
Oh, I totally would. It was the first one I looked up. So you guys out there who have that. Well done. Well done, and screw you, indeed.
I think we're all happier for an original trilogy reference instead of a prequel trilogy reference.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we did a pretty good job of rewriting this movie and making it pretty interesting. There's a lot of really good beats there.
I think we built off each other pretty well in this movie, especially because I was about to like be like, we're gonna start with the jungle world underneath their shit. Like, we just started saying that,
totally.
I'm like, damn it! Hive mind.
I checked my screen for a moment too.
Yeah, I looked at your notes because
wait, those are my notes. Brilliant. Well done, guys. I'm excited about this one. I kind of want to see
I kind of want to make it now.
Yeah. This would be a fun movie. Like, hopefully, what would be great is if we get far enough down the road with the Star Wars universe where they do a reboot.
Well, forget a reboot for a moment. I think, and we were talking about this earlier, especially with how abruptly Clone Wars ended with the Disney buyout. Mm-hmm. It would be great to go back to Clone Wars and revisit that era. I mean, there's so much story left to tell in Clone Wars, and I felt they were only really scratching the surface with that. I mean, we clearly have interesting enough characters with Saw Gerrera that they can come back to. You've got the era of Clone Wars after Ahsoka has left the Jedi Order. I mean, like this is a story. I think some of these elements that we've talked about today are interesting elements you can work into Clone Wars stories. Like you can tell, like there was a scene in like a deleted scene for Revenge of the Sith where Padme does meet with Bail Organa and Mon Mothma and some other characters they start planting the beginnings of the Roman
that's back in my edit.
Yeah. And like you could start taking those elements and you could start seeing these characters, you could start seeing these bonds start to set up the Rebel Alliance. We're seeing some of this stuff with Rebels, but I think it's still possible to go back to Clone Wars and do this. And whether that's in live action or an animation.
But the problem with Clone Wars is the same problems that we're having kind of with this whole idea, is that you're still tied to a lot of those previous movies. Whereas if you go to actually do a hard reboot of the entire series, you know, you can make Grievous a far more interesting character. You can, you know, there's a lot that you can do and fix some of the problems that were created by Lucas by doing a hard reboot.
Yeah, Grievous at this point is a tough to fix character, but I think there is backstory for Grievous you can fill out, because there is like on the Wikipedia page for Grievous, you do have the fact that he was a general, like a Kalish general before he was put into the armor. Yeah. And you know, you could do a whole story where he was manipulated into joining the Separatists, that he was, you know, this warrior that you love
your bad guys to be manipulated and think that they're doing something great. That's like your go-to play. That is your go-to play. That and killing the protagonist at the end is your favorite thing in the world.
I'm the main reason I'm continuing with Grievous on that path is because of Lucas wanting to use Grievous as sort of the precursor for Vader. So drawing that parallel is the main reason I think that fits Grievous. So
yeah, no, and I'm with you because that line in the opening crawl where it's like heroes on both sides.
Yeah,
like we never get that. Yeah, and I would have loved it. And next time when we talk about clones, I've got a big thing about making it more like the Trojan War that I think you guys will really dig. But in the meantime, we've got the characters we have, and I'd love for them to be more complex and not just I'm evil and I serve the dark guy. Right. I would rather it be like I'm doing what I believe in, and I'm going to try so damn hard.
And there are valid reasons for what you're doing.
Yeah, because your frontliners aren't going to be the ones who are like pulling all the strings. They're the ones whose strings have been pulled. And how much more interesting is it if they are the ones who either feel like there's no other choice or that this is absolutely the right thing?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you don't get that sense, especially because there's a robot army.
Yeah, so, and they're so devoid of personality. And
the personality they have is just pure crap.
Right.
And they're just so inept and stupid. So
what if the Separatists were made up of a lot of like Twi'leks or something, like where it was a race that we saw that was pretty human, and it was like one that we've seen enough of.
Well, someone that could actually emote.
Yeah, exactly. Like if there was, so it wasn't just all like
just a droid army.
Yeah, well, droid army, and then the people running it are like, how many like weird squiggly bug-looking people can we make and put on screen? Right. Like if it was a race that we saw a good amount of, and it was like that was like the way humans are the main part of like the Republic, and then there's other aliens, but it's mostly humans. Right. Like if there was another like big humanoid species, that hopefully one that we had seen before.
Right.
So that's
where you could reintroduce the Chiss. Would be cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Would be very cool. So, all right, good stuff, guys. I appreciate this. This has been a fun episode. I think we pretty much exhausted it, though. So let's wrap it up.
And don't forget, you can join the conversation as well. Just let us know what ideas you think could have, you would add to, or you would change to make Revenge of the Sith a better movie. What would you do to rewrite Revenge of the Sith? You can join the conversation. Just go to our website, certainpov.com, to find all the different ways to contact us on social media. You can even email us if you prefer that. But we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. All of that is available to you, certainpov.com. And don't forget, until next week, stay scruff.
You're so close. You're so close.
So close.
We almost didn't need a single edit.
Yeah. Stay scruffy, my nerf herders.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Head over to certainpov.com.
We've made difficult decisions.
And there are still more ahead of us.
2 people aren't enough to save the galaxy.
We need the toughest,
smartest,
deadliest allies.
We need you.
We need you to join us.
And listen to Reignite,
a Certain Point of View podcast about storytelling,
love,
and Mass Effect.
Join us every other Thursday as we fight for the fate of an entire galaxy.
You can find us everywhere you get your podcasts.
Or at certainpov.com/reignite.
We're counting on you.
We should go.
And we're back, Sam. So for me, this was a weird walk down memory lane and trying to be like, oh yeah, I said those words. That's weird. Do I share those thoughts and so
I
forth?
feel like that with every episode I listen to. No.
Yeah.
I'm like, I said that? That was good.
Yeah, sometimes like off the cuff things, I'm like, oh, I'm very proud of that. And then other times I'm like, oh, wow, I couldn't get those words out.
Yeah.
That was terrible.
Oh, sometimes I want to hide under my desk. Like sometimes I'm listening to us and I'm like, oh, why would I say that? But yeah, otherwise, yeah. So that was fun though. Going down 2017 though. That's hard to remember.
Yeah, some crazy memory lane bits. Like I give a shout out to Moonin at the beginning of the pitch process, and that indicates a couple of weird things. Like first of all, this is back when Certain Point of View was exclusively recorded locally. Like Ben and Addy had set up a studio in Addy's basement that was like the default like recording area, and so Skype calls were a thing we just didn't do. And as a result, like Jeff couldn't be on the show because he wasn't local, and so he'd have to like come and like to the studio and like record, which is like mind blowing now because it's 2021 and we've been doing Zoom calls exclusively for the last year and a half for everything because of a pandemic.
Definitely.
And even before that, we had done plenty of stuff that were Zoom calls just by virtue of like wanting to get cool guests and so forth. So long time ago. And eventually Moonin would get Fun and Games started. I think this is about the time he had started that show. And the first couple of episodes were not part of Certain Point of View. And I talked to him and he like introduced me to Matt. And that's how like the network part of Certain Point of View really like became a thing, because we had Another Pass and Scruffy Nerf Herders initially as like bonus episodes on Certain POV, and then they spun out into their own shows. And roughly around the same time, Matt and Jeff agreed to like come on over to Certain POV. So at first it was Certain POV and its spinoffs, and then we actually had like our first like other show. And now like there's so many shows on this network. It's so crazy to like go that far back in time.
Oh wow, this episode's like a time capsule.
Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, like so you noted that we like really jump into it without any sort of preamble about the movies.
Yeah.
And I think that's because, as I was saying beforehand, it was a Star Wars show. And so we had waxed and waned about the prequels plenty of times in like small chunks up until that point, because I think this was like episode like 15 of the show. And I had been coming on since episode 5 or 6. So like it was like we all knew roughly what we thought about the prequels. And pop culture was, I don't know, it's so weird how like Rise of Skywalker has like killed a lot of momentum for Star Wars. Like, it's kind of coming back for me now. Like Mandalorian obviously was great, but it kind of felt like its own thing. Outside of the fact that it had so many references, it still felt like a different genre than like the main Skywalker movies.
Yeah, I mean, I think like in general, the new Star Wars things we'll see coming out in the future, because there's no way Disney is going to let go of this cash cow. I think the future things will kind of feel other than, and I think that's okay. I think it's fine. I think it's fine for kind of like the Skywalker saga to be over. Like, I think it's okay to just kind of move on from that world and just kind of, well, still be in the same world, but maybe not related to the family completely. But you're right. There is a sense of closure, maybe, which, is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. It felt like at the time, like as Star Wars fans, we were much more in it on like the, like, what is the direction of this franchise, of these characters?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how's it all going to go? It, especially with the initial Disney buy, it felt so rejuvenated. And so like all the conversations I had in high school and college and as an adult were all like bubbling up and being like, well, these are the things I used to think. And now they're doing these movies. And how is it, how are they going to wrap it all up? And kind of the same energy I had when the prequels first came out. Mm-hmm. Because, the prequels, the time period was not defined, but it was certainly well trodden. Like they had gone into great detail in the books, but usually as like, oh, here's a veteran of the Clone War, or here's the in the Thrawn trilogy, the clone Jedi master who makes a clone of Luke Skywalker, for example. Like, yeah, Luke Skywalker. But like that time had a lot of stuff already associated with it. Like we all kind of felt like we knew roughly how things went. So we all had our own headcanon versions of it. And we were all like very excited when the prequel started coming out to like get then like, no, this is going to be the canon version of that story you've had in your head.
Yeah.
And like, did you read the Star Wars books as a kid? Like
I read a fair amount of them. I also read like comics related to it. I was fairly into all of these things. And I think that's why, and I know like now we have like generations of people who really defend the prequels and, you know, kind of grew up with them. But I want them to understand that for those people who were disappointed with the prequels, part of the reason is, and I'm not defending a toxic fan base, because I do think that Star Wars can be a toxic fan base, and attacking actors for roles is not cool and not okay, and it's not their fault. But I will say that like we had so much material and things built up by writers and you know, novelizations and comics and all of these things that went back into the Clone Wars or even went forward into the future, you know, things that would happen to Leia and Luke and things like that, that by the time we got to the prequels and we got what we got, as flawed as they were, it was really hard for people our age to not complain about it. It was really, really difficult to not be like, well, why would you do that? And this contradicts this and that contradicts that, because we had already like had successful novels and writings about what could happen and what did happen. And so it was just kind of, I don't know. Definitely one of those things where it's just like, oof, it was hard. It was hard.
Yeah, like obviously nothing that is actually created is ever going to live up to our headcanon, to our expectations that we had built up so much. And now looking back at the prequels as having been fairly well established and built upon now, I can more readily like approach it from the standpoint of, okay, this is what happened, as opposed to being, you know, filled with regret about all the things and all the ways that I would want to have done it that weren't going to be there. But it kind of creates what I think is like the perfect Another Pass movie. Like there's a reason this was a good idea for the show. And I still think this was a really good episode of certain, like, I still think this was a really good episode of certain point of view, as well as just being a good episode of like doing the Another Pass format, because I think it worked really well. A further conversation about Star Wars that we were having at the time. And then the movie itself is like so well known, like the errors that are like actual errors are so well covered in fandom that it's hard not to like know about those things, that the promise is so much out there for people. Like everyone has that, like they want to love it vibe. And that's like one of our like kind of taglines for the show. It's a movie that you wanted to love in spite of a flaw. I think it works really well as a launching point for these kinds of episodes. And there's a reason why Return of the Jedi was the first episode of like Another Pass when it became its own series.
Right.
Because that format was the type of thing, or like that kind of passion for a property, even though it was well known that it had its limits in terms of its actual quality. I think really makes like Another Pass like function as an idea. And I think looking at this episode, you're like, yeah, I can see why this one, like I can see why we wanted to do this then for the show that existed. And I can see why we were so excited when we did this episode and then the next two, that it felt like it should be its own thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think objectively, where these movies fail, I mean, there are a lot of things that are not really cohesively great about the prequels. There's good things, of course. But I think the biggest issue that I have with it from just a structure wise is that it relies so heavily on someone experiencing and knowing other media, like knowing the Clone Wars. Like I feel like, and the animated series, I feel like everything should be encapsulated in a film. Like the film should be able to explain itself. And one of the really great points brought up, which everyone just heard, was that Anakin's fall into darkness and his descent is kind of like not the trigger in this film is not pronounced enough. Like, it just happens too quickly, right? Like, there's no real there's nothing that really kind of pulls you into it. And so I think that was an amazing point made during this discussion, because that has been one of my biggest issues with this particular film, is just that, you know, you don't really understand that. And I think that the other flaw in this, and you all touch on it briefly towards the end, is just Amidala's character and how she's completely wasted in this film. You know, the first film you introduce her and she's this, well, again, writing is always a little muddled, but she's a seemingly savvy politician who's trying her best to get out of things. She's very young, but, you know, she's doing the best that she can with the experience that she doesn't have. The second film, she actually has scenes where she's fighting. This film, literally, I mean, she's just in love. She's just pretty. She stops being the consummate, like, politician that she's always been. You know, she's not really there for Naboo the way that she was. And if I were, because you guys took a stab at it, but what I would like to say is that what has always been my rewrite, my headcanon, is that first scene where she tells Anakin that she's pregnant. I wouldn't have it. I wouldn't have her tell him. I would have her still insist on keeping their marriage a secret. And I would have her still being a politician, so not hiding in the background when he's met by all the people going into the council. I didn't understand that. And I would have her enter and, you know, kind of, and I would show a relationship between her and Organa, and I would have him be her out. I would have some inklings of a relationship or rumors of a relationship with her and Anakin. I would have her freak out about that and know that it's going to ruin whatever political and aspirations he has as a Jedi. And I would have her decide that it was best for both of them, since they could never truly ever come forward, for her to enter into an engagement to also back up, have Alderaan back up Naboo and have an alliance that was, you know, kind of a relationship-ish, or rather through marriage, a political marriage. That way, towards the beginning, middle of the film, once she's already kind of, you know, make it a quick marriage ceremony, like, you know, courthouse kind of ceremony, and have her just whisk away. That way, first of all, he's lost everything. Anakin has already lost her. And when he gets kind of word that she's pregnant, he does fly there before any killing children. She says that she confirms that she is, and he asks if they're his, and she says, "I'm sorry." She doesn't lie, but she says, "I'm sorry." And then he assumes that she's just pregnant with someone else's child, and then he can be more easily manipulated, because now he's lost, you know, his relationship due to, like, just the political status. He also doesn't agree with things that happen. I would still jump into everything that was said in this pitch about the way that Palpatine and the complexities happen, but I think that would add another layer to kind of making him lose it. And then later on, once everything's said and done and he's dead and all that jazz as Anakin, Obi-Wan can go to Alderaan and take Luke, because together the twins just give off too much of a vibe of the Force, but separate they can be hidden. And so then he takes Luke away. That way he never knows that there was a possibility of children, like, ever. And that solves the children issue, right? Because he'll never he'll assume that if Luke is with his brother, like, even if he looked, I heard that part. He never looked up his brother. Even if he looks up his brother, he'll assume that Luke's his brother's kid. Like, he won't assume that that's his kid, because he didn't have any kids. Because Padme fucking, abandoned him and went to marry that fucking politician. And then, like his hatred of Leia makes so much more sense, because not only is she, like, this rebel spy scum, but she's the daughter of the man the woman he loved left him for. And that's my rewrite on just that part.
You know, I was thinking, like, is that going to work with the Leia in the future stuff? Like, would Vader be tolerant of the girl that he knew for a fact was his ex-wife's daughter, and then the man he left her for, or she left him for. That I'm like, would he be angrier? Would he be studying her more, or would that actually give her some like outs? Like he tolerates her a little bit more as a result. Like,
well, maybe it's like a creepy Snape thing. Like he's still part her mom.
yeah.
You know, like she might look just like her mother. So it's like, it's really hard to like, he hates her and he's hunting her, but he can't really like kill the part of her that is Amidala.
I do love that, because that is exactly the Snape Harry situation right there.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how I would fix that. That's how, and what I do like about that, and I will say, because for me, that fixes the flaw of Amidala in the last film. I feel in the last film, she was kind of just put as kind of like the Virgin Mary, right? She's supposed to be like so kind and good. And she's like, there's still good in him. I know. She goes after him, even though she's like pregnant and about to give birth. And she dies of a fucking broken heart, which I fucking hate. I hate it so much. So I think what this rewrite would do, would give her agency, because it would be her decision to give up love for her love of both Anakin's career and also her love of Naboo. Because the thing is, by the third movie, she stops being this like queen that's just trying to protect her people. She's just like Anakin's wife. And that was very disappointing for me. Like the second movie was already hard enough to watch because the love story was so fucking awkward. But this gives her agency back, right? This makes her a tough queen that is willing, as all through history, to put aside what she really wants and what would be her heart's desire for her people, for the safety of her children. Because here's the truth. He's not supposed to have kids. She's not supposed to have his children. They're not supposed to be married. Those children's lives are in danger. The safest way to save her kids and to save him is to get married to someone else and pretend those children are that person's. That is the safest route as a woman. And her character in the first movie would have done that.
I buy it. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's sad because there are so many scenes that were cut from Revenge of the Sith that involved like sort of the background political stuff. That they're on the deleted scenes for it. And it's like, oh, here's a sit down with Mon Mothma and all of those.
Yeah.
Here's more stuff with Jimmy Smits. Like, it's such a bummer because as much as like the vote of no confidence scene in Phantom Menace is like garbage, just in terms of like it's the way it's presented and like how it's kind of structured, because it's like so over the top manipulative and whatnot. Part of that, like some of those politics should be there, especially in the third movie. Like, the first movie where we're kind of getting our footing for the current political spectrum, it feels weird to just sort of like stop everything and like cut over to that. Like, if it was like an Empire Strikes Back kind of situation where the parties had split and we were watching them simultaneously, like the political stuff while the Jedi were dealing with like Darth Maul or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. Like that could have kind of made it work and we'll get to that with Phantom Menace. But in this, by the time we get to this movie, the politics fucking matter. Like the switch from the Republic to the Empire is a thing that you need to deal with in some regard. Like I've enjoyed Bad Batch recently since it's set right when Order 66 occurs, and like how clones who are not affected by it. This is not a huge spoiler. This is the first 10 minutes of the show. The clones who are not affected by Order 66, how they perceive the changes to the world around them. I think that's a really cool kind of setup. Order 66 is kind of bullshit anyway, but like I want to know about that switchover where we go from a 1,000-generation republic to a full-on empire that is this dictatorship being controlled by a dark wizard. Like, when that shift occurs, I want to know how that happened in more detail than just, I did it.
Absolutely.
Because like there's a lot of comparisons you could make to like Rome and like where you could like deal with this whole thing about how like secretly he had kind of become it anyway, you know, like to the day he died. I may have said this in the episode. To the day he died, Augustus was considered the person who saved the Republic. He was called princeps, like the first citizen, but he was presented as being a citizen in the Republic of Rome. And it was only later that it was sort of formalized into being this imperial power, even though it had become such at that time.
Yeah. I think you're right.
You know, I'd want to see something for Palpatine.
There had to be some sort of way other than just like a mass fight to have you see the rise of fascism, to have you see the rise of this empire, of this controlling space. And you don't really get that. And I know that makes this movie darker. And I know that this is supposed to be family fare, but I just feel like there needed to be kind of those kind of things. You have to see Anakin kind of like fall and be seduced and understand. And like, you know, I feel like there had to be more fleshed out with the complexities of the Jedi Order and how political that was too. And I like that in the episode, you all talk about how there had to be more ambiguity. There had to be more good guys and bad guys on all sides. There had to be more gray space, because that's when you can actually make arguments that the good guys aren't always good, like you can kind of chip away at credibility. You can manipulate someone. And I think that like if towards the middle of the movie, Anakin already felt completely alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it's easier for Palpatine, who's seemingly just bringing order, I'm just bringing order. This is chaos. Don't you see this is chaos? Do you see what the Order's doing? Do you see what that school does? It manipulates these children. It teaches them this, it teaches them that. But what about this? Don't you see? They're the reason you can't, you know, be with the one you love. They're the reason she's married to someone else now. They're the reason that, you know, they don't like the way that you do things. I like the way that you do things. You're so smart. You've done so much for them. How could they not realize your worth, Anakin? There had to be more coaxing. There had to be more gaslighting from Palpatine to Anakin. You had to see him really feel like the Jedi Order needed to be put down, that this school was somehow more harmful to these children than living. That that's not in this film. And yes, that scene where you see that cute little innocent face and you see him raise the lightsaber, that's a great scene. I mean, like, I wouldn't cut that. Like, that'd be great. You could still do that. There just needs to be more from point A to get you to the point of killing children.
Right.
You know, like there just has to be more in between. And so I think like that's the thing. And here's the thing, the way I've rewritten it, you still end on a hopeful note because you end in Alderaan. You end with Amidala kissing her baby boy behind, putting him in Obi-Wan's hands and watching them walk out into light, like towards a spaceship. And that's your new hope heading out to the rest of the world, right? So you're still like, you know, because we know that there's a hope on the horizon. I mean, many years later and Alderaan's going to die, but still we know that there is hope out there. We know that this is not the end of the story. We know that the balance to the Force is going to be brought eventually because we've already seen the last half of this film. This is the middle, right? This is the middle of an epic tale of 6 episodes. And this episode needed to be heartbreaking. It needed to be tragic. And it needed to be tragic right in the middle, leading into A New Hope.
Yeah.
So I think like that's, you know, but everything everyone said in this episode was really good. And yeah, I mean, although I'm voting for leaving Grievous just a villain. Just leave him a villain. Just let him be villainous. I like villains for villain's sake. I don't like backstories. I don't like Maleficent. I don't like the remake of Cruella de Vil. I don't like when you tell me that my baddies are like bad because of reasons. Just let them be bad. Let Maleficent be petty. You didn't invite her to a party, so she killed you. General Grievous was made to kill Jedi, so he kills them. That's it. Like, just let him be a baddie. Like, let him serve his purpose. Some people are just bad. They're just bad. And that's okay.
Yeah, I just think in that scenario, then I would like more explicit manipulations by Palpatine of the Trade Federation, like feeling like that they were in on that they weren't actually trying to win, but just be a bad guy for the Republic to fight.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like, this is really a movie where when you look at it, you can really see how it's such a first draft of the ideas that Lucas wanted it to do. And like, I think that a lot of the ideas that have come out of it, like the Clone Wars and so forth, and this and any other kind of like project that has sort of like fleshed out the world or like articulated what was missing from the finished product, is just, I mean, it's the benefit of hindsight, but it's also like just makes it more apparent that with all of these, especially Phantom Menace, but with all of these, that like Lucas just had no one pushing back on him and not enough of like an editorial process to shape the screenplay to a finished point. That I'm not saying that there weren't multiple drafts, but it does feel like no one really like gave him notes about like, oh, this chunk isn't working at all. It was usually like, hey, I love this bit, but one thing I think would make it better is this kind of like that kind of like yes manning trying to critique.
Yeah.
Which I realize you have to do sometimes. But the first Star Wars movie, like man, it is very different from the original draft to what actually made it on screen. And even the shooting script, like obviously there's like the Star Wars like wildly different script that was made into a comic and has been like leaked around not leaked, like just available everywhere. Like that's very different, but like the shooting script for Star Wars and then how they edited it is so wildly different. Like there's the infamous screening that Lucas did with like with like all of his like buddies from UCLA, just to like show off like, hey, this is what I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
And Spielberg and all these other guys were just like Brian De Palma like rewrote the opening crawl for him and like they like chopped it all down because they all believed in him, but at the same time it just wasn't there.
Hey,
and so like
listen, it's good to have friends. It's good to have friends.
Yeah. Like Star Wars A New Hope is the movie that got another pass.
Yeah. We all need friends like that, honestly. And that's the truth. So it's like I just feel like his friends needed to show up and edit starting with the Phantom Menace and kind of just push back. But you're right. I mean, like, again, I think that Star Wars films, and I've said this before and I will say it again, I think that Star Wars films are wonderful fantasy films that should not be taken too heavily. My biggest issue with the prequel films is that they just, there was a lot of headcanon going on for me, but there are lots of things that I just think that he needed to push back on, and they ultimately do not stand well as individual films, like at all, where I can sit down and watch Empire and watch Jedi and even though they're flawed, it's still an enjoyable thing to just watch it. Like there's so much like backstory that you have to know for the prequels, and there's so much like individual things that are not like involved in like 4, 5, 6. I'm talking about like you have to watch a cartoon to understand the motivations of some of these characters, and it's like I remember thinking, I mean, back then it was like only $11, but I remember thinking like I paid $11 for something that doesn't hold all the answers. Like that doesn't make sense to me. Like make this movie make sense without a supplemental like appendage. Because if I'm going to spend real money to come and sit here, I want you to explain to me from beginning to end what's happening from beginning to end in this particular film. Don't jump off and expect me to go do extra readings. Like you're giving me homework, dude. Don't give me homework. Right. So that's still annoys me about these films. Are there good things about them? Yes. Are people still going to talk about them? Yes. Are people enjoying them on Disney Plus right now? Of course they are. I don't know who these people are, but I commend you, because whatever you like is okay. It is okay with another pass. We are fine with you liking what you like. Absolutely. Even though it does need another pass. It needs some rewrites, guys. Maybe like 20.
Yeah, especially with Revenge of the Sith, where you get, I mean, especially with all of them, they all have their own.
I was like, you want to say Revenge of the Sith? I mean, come on, the whole second movie, like the whole love story. We're gonna get to that. We're gonna get into it, but guys.
But Revenge of the Sith had the most heavy lifting to do, because by the time you got to Revenge of the Sith, so much of the status quo of Star Wars hadn't been established in the movies yet, that they had to get to all of the stuff for us to get to A New Hope in that chunk. And, you know, to the day I die, I think they should have smushed episode 1 and 2 together, you know, got whatever you needed from 1 and put it into 2. And then Revenge of the Sith should have been split in 2, and that should have been 2 and 3, because they just had so much to get through that they just weren't going to get through.
Yeah. Also, make Anakin older. It's creepy. The love story is creepy. He's a child. She's already like practically an adult. That it's creepy. I don't like it. I don't like to think about it. I don't like it. It feels like grooming. I don't like it. Don't like it at all. I'm just saying. I know we're gonna go there. I know we're not covering that movie there yet, but I just want to put that in the world.
It doesn't feel as weird.
Right.
by this point, Hayden Christensen
by this
and
movie.
Natalie Portman
And again,
feel fine.
I didn't watch the first movie, right? Because I'm doing the rewatch as we do these episodes. So I rewatched this. This feels fine, right? Hayden Christensen, appropriate age for Natalie Portman. This is not like a horrendously awful thing by the third film. So it's fine. It's fine in this film. They're a fine couple, despite the fact that they have to be secretive and whatever. And he also says some really weird, toxic shit lines to her. Like, it is, like, it's not great in this movie, but it's
a Lucas script. Like,
it's so bad. Like, it's so bad. Like, I don't even remember.
I
the
empathize
line.
with the man so much, but yeah, his dialogue needs some touching up at any given point.
When she's like, he's like, "You're beautiful," and she's like, "You're just saying that because you're just saying that because you love me." And then he's like, "No, you're beautiful because I love you." I remember like being like, "What?" Like back, like back in the movie, there's just like, "What is this nonsense? What is that? You're beautiful because I love you?" No, bro. Like, you're always beautiful. That's what you should say to her. You're always beautiful. Like, no, that's weird. That's weird. I mean, I guess you're a Sith Lord, so I guess it's okay. Okay, I guess it's in character. But that shit is weird.
I don't know. I feel like you could make that work with like some sort of like pan kind of like love situation in like this big alien world that they exist in, where it's just like, oh yeah, you love the I was about to say person, but like really the sapient. And then you find what you find attractive about them. You can make that work, but it's not good. It's a bad line.
I guess it just feels like
that's
really
me playing Sith's advocate.
Yeah, definitely Sith's advocate. Because to me, it just felt like her beauty was validated in his eyes, and that's what he's saying. And it's just like, it's just so bad because on one level, it's like maybe he's just agreeing with her. So then you're just talking again to agree with her, right? You know, you're just saying that because you love me. Yeah, you're beautiful because I love you. Yeah, no, that's the same statement. You're actually disagreeing with her, but you said no, and that doesn't make sense to me. But then there's the other way, which is like, yeah, because I love you. You're beautiful. I bring that out of you. You're welcome. And it's gross. It is gross. And I hate it. I hate that whole line.
Yeah, I get what he's trying to say. It's just the line was not well written, and notoriously Lucas is not an actor's director.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yep. And because so much was shot in either a vacuum or in a green screen, like by a vacuum I mean like only getting one person's side of any given scene,
right?
Or just like they're in a green screen and you don't get any of the context outside of the actor you're playing against, which is the best case scenario for almost all of this movie. Yeah, no one's like necessarily like finding the proper delivery on lines because they're not being afforded the environment to work with.
Yeah,
that's
true.
Yeah.
I do not have any hate for anyone who was in this film. I want to officially say that. I do not have any hatred for any of the actors or what they did. I know poor Natalie Portman really had a hard time after she was done with Star Wars. I would never hate on actors, but this script, I will forever kind of hate on this script. Less this script than movie 2, but we'll discuss that another day.
Yeah. On that note, we have been talking for a bit about this one, and that was also a full episode of a show.
Yeah, so we should stop.
So, yeah, but I hope everyone enjoyed this walk down memory lane for another pass. We'll be back next week with we're breaking tradition. We're not preparing for a different type of thing. We'll be back next week to talk about Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, because Case is getting married. It's kind of a history lesson for those of us who aren't walking down memory lane, too. So you're welcome, everyone. Welcome to A Certain Point of View History with Case Aiken and Samantha Alicea.
But when you're done with this tour down history, you can actually go and check out and see how Certain POV is doing currently. So head on over to certainpov.com, where you can find more episodes of this show and continue that walk down history lane. Or you can check out plenty of the other great shows that we have on the network, like Fun and Games, the first show to actually join the network. Matt and Jeff have been doing an amazing job just talking about video game culture. And then their spin-off series, Side Quests, gives people the ability to just rave about a game that meant something to them for 5 to 15 minutes. And it's both are just a really great series that I'm so proud became part of this network so early and really led to the growth of everything else we've been doing. Check that out. After that, you can head on over to our Discord server. We're doing this call right now on Discord. We've got great conversations going on. Our community has become very strong. So come join us and talk about video games or Star Wars stuff. We love all of this nerd stuff.
100%.
And so you can find us both there. But if you're not on Discord, Sam, where can they find you?
They can find me here with you, Case, and talking here. And then they can find me on Discord. And if you have any problems with what I said, come at me at Discord. Another Pass has a space, and I will listen. I might not respond, but I will listen, and I will give you a BB-8 flame sticking up. And, just out of support, nothing violent. And, but for further complaints, you can find Case, who's in charge of our Twitter account at...
Well, you can find me personally on Twitter at Case Aiken. You can find Another Pass at Another Pass on Twitter. Send messages at us or follow us and just, keep alert of the latest episodes that are coming out or when we highlight anything that our friends are doing. Trying to keep it not be just too much spam, not just be retweets of my personal account. So if you don't want all of the other crap that I am involved in blasted at you all the time, Another Pass is a great place to follow. And if you just want to give it a follow just because, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, you can also be Case's friend. He's very supportive. He does retweet things of people he loves. So be Case's friend.
I do. If you're a friend of mine, I don't know where I was going to go with that. I do. I try to I try to support everyone. So if I can be of support to you, reach out. I love making friends on the internet. I've made a lot of good friends on the internet, especially in this past year and a half of being locked down.
Yeah.
So we'll be wrapping up the rest of the Star Wars prequel trilogy in the next 2 episodes. After that, we will be getting back to our usual format. So Sam, after we are done covering the Star Wars prequels, what are we talking about?
On the next episode of Another Pass, we'll be talking about Highlander 2, The Quickening. But if you enjoyed this for now, pass it on.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Definitely Revenge of the Sith was my favorite of the 3 prequels. Although they equally are all deeply flawed. But probably the second movie is going to be my biggest nightmare to speed through.
Yeah. That is super fair.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't screen beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential Screen Beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
Writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry,
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not.
Can I call them Screen Beans now?
Fine.
Screen Beans.
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're all Screen Beans now.
You will be mine. Aurora.
I already bought it on Amazon and watched it.
You bought it?
Yeah, well, there's no
watched
rent
it. I thought
option.
we were going to watch it together.
Betrayer. You cheated. You already knew.
You Batmaned me.
Oh, no.
Man, that movie was excellent.
It really was. Totally blew my expectations away.
I know, right? Now I really want to tell everyone about it. But I'm not sure how.
Yeah. If only there was a podcast dedicated to reviewing films and discussing the latest news and trailers on upcoming films. That would be nice.
Yes, for sure. And we can call it the Cineguy Show.
What? No. It will be called Real Movie Critic Unleashed.
No. How about Cineguy featuring Real Movie Critic?
How about the Real Movie Critic and his sidekick, the Cineguy?
CG and RMC.
RMC and CG.
The Real Movie Critic versus the Cineguy. Only at CertainPOV.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're going down, critic.
Bring it on, guy.
But yeah, I think we'll do riff tracks for a bunch of movies. We could definitely do one for Warcraft. We could probably do a couple.
That'd be a
Warcraft.
fun spin-off show for us as a whole riff track.
Can we do it just in like peon voice the whole time?
Yes.
Does that work?
Yeah, that would be awesome. That'd be awesome.
I like it.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.